This computer. Okay, I think it's all good to go.
I know you got one of them. How does your business do it down here? Mine are starting to die off. Yeah, it's still blooming. A couple of mine are starting to die off.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for making it out to today's meeting and presentation. I know parking was a little bit challenging. I think we all had similar issues with parking in the event, but I'm glad that you all were able to make it today. So today's presentation will be given by me, and it's really about this topic of how do I price and sell my Carnivorous plants. And this is a topic that I thought was appropriate just because we're winding down the growing season. We finished our big annual summer show and sale event back in August. And so now would kind of maybe be the time to start thinking about, it might be a little bit too early because it's a whole half a year away, but if I want to sell plants, how do I sell plants for our next big summer show and sale, or even maybe even before, maybe at some of our summer or spring meetings. So I'll kind of be sharing my experience with that, my history with that, and maybe some questions, things for you to think about as you kind of approach this topic. All right, so my background. Okay, who is this guy? Why is he up here speaking? What authority does he have? So just a little bit about me. I started growing carnivorous plants back in 2017, so that's about 7 years now. I saw a picture of a sundew, typical Capensis sundew on YouTube. It was a video. It was like one of those time lapses where someone puts a fly on the leaf of the Capensis, and it would curl up and attach all of its sticky dew. And I was like, wow, that's so amazing. These carnivorous plants are so cool. And as a kid growing up, I'm pretty sure everyone had a very similar experience. I got one of those Home Depot, Lowe's, Venus flytrap. I tried keeping one of those, ended up killing it, and I thought carnivorous plants are not for me. It's too hard. But then I saw this later on around college years, and I was really inspired to try carnivorous plants again. Hopefully a little bit wiser and a little bit more mature. So I got my first carnivorous plant off of Amazon of all places. I was like, I didn't know you could order plants online. Again, this was my first kind of step into just plants, growing plants, keeping plants as an adult. So I got it off Amazon. I didn't know you could do that. I literally just Googled carnivorous plants buy onto Google, and this is the first link that showed up. And so I didn't know if this was real, if I could do it, but it turned out to be real. So that was my first carnivorous plants, and now I'm here giving a presentation on how do you buy, sell carnivorous plants. So that's quite the journey, like I said, 7 years of doing this. And so now I primarily grow indoor plants. So that's kind of my specialization. Next slide. So again, to kind of give credence to who is this guy? Why should he be the one to be giving this presentation? Here's a picture of me. This is my first time I sold carnivorous plants at any kind of event. And this was the Southern California Carnivorous Plant Enthusiast Show and Sale back in 2022. So this is kind of like in the midst of pandemic time. And by then I had been growing carnivorous plants for about 4 or 5 years. But this was my first real attempt at selling carnivorous plants. And so a lot of what I'll be sharing today is hopefully kind of my thought process and guidance and some of my principles that I've been using to kind of prepare for events like this. And you'll notice 2022, that's not too long ago. That was just 2 years ago. And this was my first time selling. And since those 2 years, I've kind of built up a lot of experience, knowledge on how do I divide plants? How do I sell plants? How do I price plants? I know that's a very difficult question, especially if it's your first time. I know it was very difficult for me. During my first time, I was like, I don't know how to price these. Like, I buy a lot, but how do I sell it? Am I confident at these prices? Is this a good deal? Is this a bad deal? Like, what are other people doing? I don't know. This was my first experience kind of doing that. And so you'll see I had a wide selection of different butterworts, bladderworts, sundews, and what was it? Nepenthes cuttings as well. So that was kind of my first experience. And then over the years, I've kind of gained more experience, more exposure to this kind of opportunity where I've really just put myself out there and be like, okay, I'm going to sell my plants and see if they sell, if people are interested in them. What types of plants are they interested in buying? So the next couple of slides is just kind of the progress and the evolution of that. So I believe the next slide is, here it is again, in 2023, another event that I went to sell. both at the Skippy show and sale up in Orange County, and then here last year, which was our first kind of comeback show and sale as the Skippy organization. We kind of revitalized it, and last year was the first time Skippy had done it since the pandemic. So those are just more examples of me selling carnivorous plants, really putting myself out there to put myself out there and like on the selling side of the table. Next slide. And then most recently, last couple of months, again, Skippy show and sale, and then the San Diego Carnivorous Plant show and sale. Just more opportunities, and you'll kind of see I tend to offer the same kind of stuff, and that's just from my experience in what I specialize in, what I'm comfortable selling. You'll tend to notice that I have offered the same types of plants. Next slide. All right. Yes. So again, it just might be my personality or what I've learned, but this is my tried and true method is KISS. Keep it super simple. This is kind of my methodology when growing plants. So how do I grow my plants? I keep it super simple. How do I sell plants? I also keep it very simple. So that's kind of my philosophy, my growing style in terms of what I'll be sharing with you. Obviously, you can kind of take the information you learned from this presentation and kind of expand on it in your kind of own unique way. But for me, I just like to keep things simple. And hopefully that will kind of show and reflect in my presentation, in my kind of growing style and my selling style as well. This is not the only way to sell, but I'm just sharing my experience. Hopefully this will inspire you, maybe get you to think about, oh, I didn't know you could do this, or maybe this is something to start with, and then you can expand upon it, or develop your own selling style, your own pricing style. Next slide. Perfect. Okay, so this is a little bit. This is my greenhouse. This is my growing section, and this is just an apartment living room. This is my apartment. I live in it, and so that really reflects what kind of plants I can and cannot grow. I cannot grow those pure outdoor plants, full sun, no Sarracenias, no American pitcher plants, no Venus flytraps. I cannot do it. I just don't have the kind of growing environment for that. So what instead I focus on are those kind of indoor hybrid plants, maybe plants that don't need the full sun. And I supplement that with a lot of artificial lighting, as you can see. Is it possible to turn off a couple of the lights so that the presentation will show up a little bit better? But I basically have these like garage shelves, and I have artificial lights on them. I have a timer just to kind of control when the lights turn on and turn off. And that's pretty much it. Next, there we go. Thank you. Next slide. So that's just like an overview of kind of my growing setup. And I don't really what was that? That is my entire setup. It's just 4 garage shelves. That's it. Next.
I think you say are in that picture right around the left.
In total, I mean, it depends on what you define as a plant, right? There is like those seedlings, there's like little divisions, there's like full mature established plants, but all together, let me just throw out a number, 500. But again, that's like including the biggest of plants to like the smallest of little seedlings and little divisions. Sure. Sometimes I have them in individual containers. Sometimes I just have them in a large community pot. So again, plants is hard to define. Like I don't go out there and count every single one. It's just too many. But just throwing out a number, 500.
And your landlord knows that you're growing plants?
Yes, yes. My neighbors know too. It's as you see, there's a window right there. So normally I have that window open, and they see all the plants, and of course they see the bright lights that are emanating from the room. They're like, "What is this guy growing up there?" I'm sure there are plenty of dead ones. I have been growing this for 7 years, so new plants grow, old plants die, new plants die. I don't know. It just happens, right? But this is my basic growing setup. So I'll kind of be sharing. Well, first, to sell plants, you need to grow plants, right? How do you grow and kind of prepare plants for selling? So with Nepenthes, one of the common ways of kind of creating divisions and selling Nepenthes plants is this thing called cuttings. Basically, all you do is you take a Nepenthes vine or a plant and you just cut it. You take those cuttings and you plant them in some potting medium, and then a new plant will establish from that cutting. It'll just pop right out. That's opposed to typical seed a seed grown plant where the the plant flowers, it creates a seed pod, you plant the seed pods, and then new plants sprout from there. So those are the two different ways. I don't typically go for the seed method just because it's a little bit longer of a process, it's more involved, and I don't have the space for very, very large plants to then be able to mature, develop those seeds, the flower stalks and the pollen pods. I just don't do that. And so to kind of conserve space, when my plant gets too big, I just cut it up and then pot it up and then make new divisions from that plant. So it's really kind of a space saving measure. But it ends up like this. These new seed cut, rooted cuttings really need, what they want is high humidity. So I just cut the plant up basically into bits, and they're losing a lot of moisture because I just cut them. And so what they want to kind of encourage that new growth is a high humidity environment. And to provide that, it's a very low budget DIY solution. Is I literally just have them sitting in a plastic tub. That's it. And that kind of traps the moisture and it creates a high humidity environment. And so that's kind of how I grow my rooted cuttings. And this is mainly for the first initial phase, maybe about 3 to 9 months, depending on the particular variety of Nepenthes it takes for it to sprout new leaves, new pitcher plants. And then once I notice that you can kind of see some of it, some of them have sprouted new leaves and kind of self-sustaining itself, then I take it out and I just kind of put it in normal ambient room temperature just to get it out of that high humidity environment and I kind of get it acclimated to more normal growing conditions.
Do you expect the old stuff? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Do you expect the old like leaves and stuff that were in the original kind to like die off?
Yes. And you can ask me more about it. And this isn't propagation. This isn't really a propagation presentation, so I'm not going to get too deep into it. But yes, as time passes and as the plant matures and hopefully new growth sprouts, the old leaves will just kind of die off with age and time. Next slide.
Do you need some ventilation in there? Does it trap heat?
It does trap a little heat, and it might not show well, but there are some cracks, so there is a little bit of airflow. If not, I can just jam like a pot to kind of create a little opening to add ventilation. But it's very DIY. Yeah. Sometimes it does get mold, and then I just spray it with like an antibacterial, antifungal spray. All right, next slide. Yeah, so two different methods or two different pathways of kind of going about Nepenthes cuttings and propagation. On the left, you have the industrial side where they have like a humidity tray, just a tray with a dome that comes over it. You can buy that off Amazon or any other place, or you can make it yourself like I did. Here you have those just plastic buckets turned upside down, drill in some holes or whatever, and that's a humidity dome. So you don't need kits. Keep it simple, super simple. So either works. Next slide. And then I kind of group this other group because they all kind of grow in similar conditions in my setup, and that is Pinguicula, Utricularia, and Drosera. Yeah, I mean, I just have them in trays, sitting in trays, smaller pots. Maybe I divide them up a little bit, and I just kind of pot them up like that, and they all kind of grow in the same condition. The nice thing about having all these little individual pots and little plant divisions in one kind of bigger container, which is that black container, is I can just pour a lot of water into that black container. It'll self-regulate. Any plants that experience more water and more evaporation, the water in the large tray will kind of regulate that. And I only need to worry about watering the big tray instead of having to water hundreds of little pots instead. So the Tupperware on the right, it does not have holes on the bottoms, and those ones are a little bit special. Those are actually my like Utricularia show plants, so I treat them a little bit differently. But the ones in the big black trays with the 2 square-inch pots, those are more designed for propagation, for selling. That's what I'm preparing to sell at these events. And they're smaller divisions. Yeah, so different purposes, but kind of the methodology is the same. So on the left, I'm dividing stuff up. I'm planting it for selling eventually. And on the right is stuff I want to personally keep. It's my personal collection. It's mostly for show.
So the ones on the right, you top water.
Do the Utricularia ever like crawl because the large kind of community
Yes.
set up? Do they ever spread to the other pots?
They do sometimes, but the way I've done it is, again, this picture might be a little bit outdated, but I've implemented a system where I have Utricularia kind of in a certain section, and then I cut that off. I buffer it with a row of like Pinquicularia, so that if the Utricularia does cross over into the next pot, it has some like buffer room so that the Utricularia don't cross pollinate into different, they don't mingle and mix together. So I have like a row or two of just Pinquicula plants potted up as kind of like a buffer so that Utricularia don't cross over.
Why is it?
Just it's all preference. Some people like a big pot, community pot of different kinds of Utricularia, hundreds of different plants. But if I'm wanting to selling these things, then some people like just one pot per species. Again, so some people are sticky about that, but then if I do notice that they kind of commingle, I'll just label it as like mixed species or something, and at least then the people buying it will know, like, okay, they're informed ahead of time. Next slide. Again, so keeping it super simple, you can buy the trays, you can buy these pots, or you can kind of recycle and reuse stuff you already have around the house. I have a lot of kimchi bottles because I eat a lot of kimchi. So I just wash those out, and then that is just my container. Great question. I just grabbed this image off of Google. I just put like recycled pots or something. I imagine it's some kind of like herb or something. It looks like rosemary. Yeah. But this is just to demonstrate that you don't need to go out there and buy pots. You don't need to buy these fancy setups. You can just reuse, reduce, recycle. Next slide. Okay, so that's kind of my growing setup. How do I grow these plants? Now we're kind of getting onto back to this picture. How do you sell them? How do you price them? Next slide. Okay, so these are the kinds of questions I'm thinking about when I'm preparing to sell, or like picking which plants I want to sell. Who is your audience? Who are you trying to sell? What is the audience you're envisioning of the type of people you're trying to sell your particular plants to? Things like what types of plants do you focus on or that you want to sell. So for me, very easy. I'm limited by my condition. So I cannot sell Venus flytraps. I cannot sell Sarracenia because I don't have the growing conditions for them. I mean, I could try, but they would probably not be in the best of quality, best of health. And I don't feel comfortable selling that. So I only sell what I know I can grow. Your selection might be different based on what you have, maybe what you want to build in the future, what you want to grow. But that's kind of something I think about. And then also price range. Are you trying to sell for very simple, affordable stuff in like the $5 to $15 range, $20 range? Or are you trying to really grow a specimen and trying to sell for like hundreds of dollars? For me, just keep it simple. I'm trying to really target the beginners, trying to give back to the community or even new growers. People I wish I had known when I was first starting the hobby. If I were back when I first started, if I were presented a $100 Nepenthes, I'd be like, oh no, thank you. This carnivorous plant stuff is not for me, because that would be my impression. So I want to provide affordable stuff for people starting out. And get them into the hobby. Then once they get more experience, then they can kind of go crazy and buy those crazy specimen plants on their own after they've had some time in the hobby and kind of exactly. And then certain growing environment. So as I shared before, I grow indoors, and I can share that knowledge when I'm selling these plants. Hey, because people often ask, one, what is this plant that I'm buying? Two, how do you grow it? And so I have that experience. Like, okay, I grow this plant indoors. But you can grow some of these plants outdoors, some of them indoors, on a windowsill, in a living room. So I have that experience. Like, okay, I've grown them this way, but I know you can grow them in a certain different other way. And then the type of grower, like I said, beginner, experienced. Some people are very hands-off. They're like, I just want a plant that will do its own thing. I don't need to baby it. And then some others are, more specialists. They're collectors. They want all the rare species. They like Pokemon. They want to catch them all. So that's just these are some questions to keep in mind as you're thinking about, okay, how do I price them? What do I even want to sell? Next slide. Okay, first tip, don't be afraid to use references. I'm sure we've all bought carnivorous plants at some point, and I don't know if you really noticed it, if you just kind of click, oh, that looks nice, add to cart, add to cart, add to cart, and then ship, and you don't really think about the prices. But really go back to those websites, go back to, I don't know, some email orders or some receipts. Go back to them and look, okay, how much did I pay for this particular specimen? What species it is, what size it is, especially with these online growers and nurseries. They do have price points, but they also have different sizes as well. So just kind of, again, don't be afraid. And don't be afraid to look at multiple different websites. Don't just choose the one that you first bought it from or the person who you bought it from. Really look online. There's a lot of information online. So there's, a bunch of different nurseries. You can even look on eBay and Etsy or whatever, just to kind of get the price range of, how much is this particular species or plant worth, ballpark. It doesn't need to be exact because, again, you have to consider into fact, especially with these nurseries, these are big commercial vendors. And so their pricing, the prices that they can offer are vastly different from just hobbyist growers who don't have the economies of scale to provide plants at such cheap or a little bit cheaper options than, us hobbyists who might only be growing a couple at a time instead of like thousands that these commercial growers are growing and providing. So keep that in mind, but it's not a bad idea to just reference them. Okay, a Venus flytrap is how much? Or a Nepenthes, a specific species of Nepenthes is how much? For what size as well? Yes, question?
Add on to that as well. A lot of these vendors, they have their plants that are not for sale because they're sold out. But another way to know, like, hey, this plant is sold out at this price versus a plant that might have been on there for 3 or 4 months at a certain price might be a bit high. Another way of looking at it as well, mostly probably for the more specialized flexible level plants, but just a thought that you can say there as well.
Great question. Yeah, so again, just reference these websites and kind of reference the price ranges so that you can kind of, you don't want to be selling like a Capensis for like $100. That doesn't really make sense. Next slide. All right, and exactly, just like what you were talking about is kind of adjust your prices as you kind of gain experience and the confidence of your product. So my first time selling, I was very unsure. Again, I did the best research I could. I looked at different websites. I looked at what other people, rough price range and price range for the size I was offering as well. I did my best, but then, of course, at your first event, you're nervous. You've never done it before. So I'm like, so when I went to my first event, I was like, I don't know. Are these prices good? Are they too high, too low? So I actually went around because it was a seller's event. I wasn't the only one selling. So I could ask other people in the community. Don't be afraid to ask other people. We're all here as a community. We're here to support each other, provide information and knowledge. How much are you pricing your stuff? How much are you selling your stuff? What is your thought process into selling this stuff? So I definitely went around to other tables. I took notes. I took pictures of like, okay, this plant you're selling for this size, what species it is, what size it is, a little bit about the presentation. Some people put it in just normal pots. Some people pretty up a little bit, provide nicer pots, provide nicer, maybe top dressing. And so I just took a look around, what are other people doing? How are they pricing their stuff? And I took that knowledge and kind of adjusted my prices. Like, okay, this thing, obviously a little bit too high, maybe I can lower it. Or something that was a little bit lower, and someone else was selling. I was like, okay, maybe I can price it a little bit higher to be, similar range. I don't want to be undercutting them and creating any bad blood or anything. So we price it around the same. And over multiple events, over multiple years, you kind of gain a knowledge of like, okay, this is like an acceptable price. There might be some fluctuations. There might be, you could sell it higher or lower depending on, those specifications that I mentioned before. You can make it look nicer, or if you're just doing bare bones like I am, simple, just 2-inch pots. Here you go. That's the plan.
Does the quality come into play?
Yeah, that would be part of kind of your confidence. Like, how confident are you in the product that you're selling, in the plants that you've grown and raised? How confident are you in the quality that you've kind of grown? Did you create a special feeding regimen that you've kind of used for your plants that you've implemented strictly so that maybe it has better coloration or it's bigger than other plants at that similar size or time or age? But that's something only you would know, right? And other people have their own special systems and how they grow their plants. So that could play a factor, but again, that might be up to you. It's like, okay, is this special advantage that I have in maybe treating my plants better or better food, better feeding regimen, would that increase the price? That's something to think about. And I don't have the exact answer because I don't do that. All right, and then I think lastly, most importantly, sell at a price you're satisfied with. So I am still in the process of learning how to price my things. As I've shared before in the previous pictures, I'm very comfortable now after 2.5 years of selling little small divisions, 2-inch pots. So Pinguicula, Utricularia, and Drosera in those 2-inch pots, and then I have the Nepenthes cuttings. Perfect. All right, I am on time. So those 2-inch pots that I'm very comfortable with selling, I know the price point, I know the species, the size, and then cuttings as well. I'm very confident with those. But recently, now that I've grown a little bit more experience and I have plants that are like 5, 6 years old, this is I want to say 4 or 5-year-old plant. And so now my collection is getting a little bit bigger. I want to get rid of some of these larger specimens, and I've never done that before. So I'm still learning. How do I price this thing? And a recent lesson that I've learned is price it at a price you're satisfied with. So if I were to sell this thing, would I be bummed out? Would I be bummed out with receiving like the cash equivalent of that? And so recently, this past summer show and sale at Skippy, I sold something like this, like a big specimen plant, for about $150, and that was like, no, I regretted that so much. I could have gotten more for that, but that was a learning experience, right? So now I'm pricing it a little higher, maybe 230 range, 250 range. Am I satisfied with receiving $250 for something like this? Maybe, I don't know. It hasn't sold yet, so maybe 250 is too high. Maybe I need to lower it. But it's, like I said before in the previous slides, it's all about experience. You do this multiple times, you learn, you adapt. So yeah, that's basically my presentation. I think next slide is just Q&A. That's the end of my presentation. So
Josh, real quick,
yes.
on the Nepenthes,
Uh-huh.
when you're pricing that, you go off nodes, you go off pictures? How would you, like $10 per picture, or, $10, $20 per node? How would you do that?
Great question. So something like this, again, I'm still figuring out how to price these big specimen plants. But for my smaller cuttings that I've taken, usually I sell within the price range of like $20 for my cuttings. But those cuttings have maybe 1 to 2 pictures or 1 to 2 established mature leaves, and that's something I'm comfortable selling. And the variation will depend on the species, the size, and the number of pictures or how big it is. Any deformities, if it's like a weird shape, sometimes cuttings have that. But yeah, that's kind of my guideline that I use when selling Nepenthes cuttings. For these big ones, I have no idea. I'm still figuring that out. Yes, question.
To add to your selling at a price you're satisfied with, something you can keep in mind as well is how badly you want it gone.
Yeah.
My philosophy is generally that, like, if I'm selling something, I want it out of my collection ASAP so I can put something else in. So you can weigh that, if you have a planche, then you're thinking, should I do $15 or $20? Is how long are you willing to sit on it to get that $20 that it's probably worth, versus if you price it lower, somebody's going to come along and be like, oh, like that's a good price, and then, snap it up.
Yep.
I have 2 questions for you. First question, do you do any sort of hardening off with your plants before you sell them?
Okay, so first question for those, I guess, for YouTube recording is, do I do any hardening before I sell off my plants? And the answer to that is yes, I do. And that's just me personally as a grower. Some people just take fresh divisions and are comfortable selling that off. I don't feel comfortable doing that because what if, at least for me, what if that plant that just got partitioned off and sold, what if it just dies immediately? And people come back to me like, hey, this plant, it just died on me and that's not fair. Can I get a refund or something? So I just don't want to deal with that. So at least for me personally, I do harden off my plants before I sell them, maybe about 3 to 6 months before I'm comfortable selling them. But your second question?
Second question is, what is the easiest thing for you to sell and the hardest thing for you to sell, regardless of size, just the plant type itself?
Question was, what is the easiest thing for me to sell, regardless of size but plant type? I don't know. I'd say they're all pretty kind of, again, the plants that I sell are kind of in that beginner range. It's aimed towards beginners. So I think all the species that I grow and I sell kind of sell equally. A lot of people buy my Nepenthes cuttings, a lot of people buy my Pinguicula, and a lot of people buy my Trichularia. And about like I'd say equal. It really depends on who is there at that particular time at what event. Um, but they all sell pretty much the same, I think, in my experience. Yes, question.
Prior 2017,
Uh-huh.
all the way, you said you started 2017.
Mhm.
Prior that, do you collecting any plans prior that before you start 2017 all the way to 2022? Did you raise any plan during that time and any failures during that time?
Good question. So the question was, before I started growing carnivorous plants in 2017, did I grow any other plants? Did I collect any other plants? And the answer to that is no, I didn't. So I started in 2017.
That was that.
Exactly. Like my entire just plant journey in general, I have never, kept or owned plants of my own before I started with carnivorous plants. So I have
2022, get all your indoors setting.
Mhm.
So how you start so fast doing 2017 all the way to making a sale? I mean, you could buy a whole bunch and you start off.
Yeah. So I definitely did buy a lot of plants, and it wasn't, I didn't buy 100 plants all at once. It was maybe like one plant a month, or 3 plants during a sale that some event was having.
The one plant, plant or 2, 4 plants from that point, you study that particular plant, how you propagate to, multiply them.
Mhm.
You study them ahead of time before you bought those plants?
No. I at least me personally, I have not bought any plants with the intention of like, oh, I'm going to sell this in the future. I bought the plants because I like the plant. I want the plant in my personal collection. And then it was only later on when the plant got bigger and grew maybe too big that I'm like, oh, okay, I need more space. I need to get rid of some stuff. So maybe then I cut it or divide it, and then the extras I sell.
Cut and propagate those plants.
That's something I learned just attending the meetings like this, interacting with people. That's something I learned over time. I didn't know it at the start. I didn't need to know it because my plants were still small and I had a lot of space. Uh-huh.
So from one shelf to the other, 2017, 2022, you make a plan to sell. So I wonder how you get from one plan, how you get the propagation, do you do any research,
Mhm.
To get a whole bunch, be able to sell out your excess.
Yeah, so this presentation was not focused really on the propagation side of things.
Right.
That's a different presentation, but yeah.
When I see you from one to the other.
Yeah, if you have any more questions, we can talk about afterwards, but because it's very like specific.
They propagate pretty much on their own. All of a sudden, you're 2 years deep and it's like, uh-oh.
Now,
You don't want to just throw away the extra material.
Uh-huh.
how come with the pricing is that particular species and the way how you raise them, like how long this plant is going to grow, is that included into the pricings? Like a particular certain plant will take you a couple years to grow a little bigger because some slow growing, just like
Mhm.
succulents, often succulents slow grower. So you pricing accordingly to the period of the growing times.
For me, I don't price according to how long it takes to grow. I just sell it at a particular size that I'm comfortable at. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how long it took me to grow. I don't even pay attention to how long it takes for me to grow. I just notice, hey, something's too big now. I need to trim it down. I need to divide it. And then those new growths, when they get to an acceptable range, something that I'm comfortable, like a size-wise selling, then I'll sell that. And it doesn't matter if it takes me 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. There's a little bit of variation. Yeah, for some plants, some types of plants that I sell, I'm like, this is the particular price. And then kind of like what Arya said, how badly do you want this gone? Then, it's always negotiable. Okay. Yeah.
So you, at one point, you brought up those commercial, sellers.
Mhm.
In general, would you say you would want to price higher than what they price or lower? And why?
It depends. I've heard arguments for both. You could price higher because one, I assume you're growing locally and you're selling locally. So your plant is hopefully acclimated to the local temperature. And you could say, hey, this is the competitive advantage compared to these online retailers. So, I'm pricing higher because this is grown locally. It's adapted locally. So, the hardening or the customization to our San Diego climate is less than if you bought a fresh plant from somewhere else that needs a little bit more time to acclimate. You could argue that. You could argue it lower because, hey, these commercial nurseries have economies of scale, so they're selling at a low price. But maybe I just want to get rid of this faster, so you can price it lower. Again, it depends on what your reasoning is, what you think you should price them at. There is no right answer. You could price them higher, you could price them lower.
You also have a personal connection with the person you're selling to.
Exactly.
Also no cost of shipping,
All right.
And tax.
because on large Nepenthes, that can add up.
Right. So it could go either way. It's literally, what are you comfortable selling? Sell at the price you're satisfied with, whether that is higher or lower compared to these online nurseries. Next question. Yes.
Since you're probably selling most of the plants at the show here, right?
Uh-huh.
Been selling orchids for more than 10 years. We have 4 shows a year here. My experience is I keep Excel spreadsheets of what I bring in and sell. I mean, pot size bulbs and all of this. My experience here is the vast majority of people who come to the show are walk-ins. And they have a threshold. My experience with orchids is about $20. If you go much above that, the plant sells slower. I go into Square System and see the timestamp of it. If something is $15, it flies out the door. These people come in, they don't really know plants, and they are willing, like $20 is, plug it down, bring something home. If something is $100, it's probably you sell it to someone who knows the plants relatively well, and there's far and few people in between, and most of the people in here probably have roasting out of the seams already with what they're having. So it's what you're saying, depends on how quickly do you want to get rid of it. You have to price it accordingly, because I price mine very low. Sometimes I look when I bought plants, and I bought some in the 20, 30 years ago, so I price them the same way.
Yeah.
So it's way cheaper than what they normally go for, but I'm a hobbyist. I don't need to make money.
Exactly.
But if I have 30 divisions from one plant, I want to get rid of 29, because they take up bench space and it's all the same. So I go as low as I possibly can without infuriating everybody else
Yeah, and like you mentioned, or like I mentioned in the presentation, who is your audience? So something like the big show and sale, where we get a lot of foot traffic of people just in Balboa Park, and people who are not hobbyists, who are just looking for cool plants. Those are your beginner audiences. And so, like you said, they don't want to buy the $100 plant. They want to buy something $20-ish, less than $20. And then there might be some specialists who heard, some crazy hobbyists who have heard about our show and sale, drove down from LA, and they're like, I'm looking for carnivorous plants that I do not have for my collection. Those would be your $100 specimen sellers.
First time I came here when the plant sell, I'm looking for someone that be able to tell me honestly that tell me this plant is for beginner, because you don't want to sell some plant that super hard to raise to beginners.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost made a big mistake when I first bought a plant and take it home, trying to get the water and put it in there. So as long the vendors here sell the plant, be honest to people who walk in, ask them, are you the beginner? If you're the beginner, you should try to grow that one first before you try to buy the other one. So I'm not sure what kind of audience here to maybe, professional, but I am a beginner. So I'm come here to search for information and all the questions that into my head. constantly asking
Mhm.
questions. I might repeat myself again because it's a lot of information and I was in Facebook, which is lots of people have different technique, different environment where they grow their own plants. So they tell you this way, you can grow outside, some say, no, you can grow indoor. It depends where the location, where they live.
Yes.
So I constantly read all information, it's kind of do and don't. Here in San Diego can do or don't. Over there, they can live in Chicago, or they can do what they want to do because of the weather, different species.
Right.
Yeah, so, I think it's more generally the water we use.
Yes. Very. Question?
Yeah, quick question. So do you have any advice on selling some of the more specimen type plants like the one in the picture, Etsy, eBay? How do you reach out to that specialized niche?
I don't have any advice on that because I'm also learning right now. I've only started selling these large specimen plants, maybe like once or twice at the last two big shows and sales. What I knew, the people who would buy something like this is not going to be the beginners. So I don't even bring them to these, regular meetings because most people are not, looking for these big, large specimen plants at these types of events. They're looking for them at the big shows and sales.
You've had some success with them.
Yes, but I've only done it twice so far, so I'm still learning, right? Two is not enough compared to just the regular meetings where I've sold my other more beginner-friendly plants. I've done that, 10s, 15 times already, and that I'm very comfortable with. I have a pattern, I have a system, so those prices I'm good. These ones I'm still learning. Like I said before, I'm adjusting my prices. The first time I sold it was too low. This time, maybe it's too high, or maybe there weren't any people interested in this particular plant. I don't know. I'm still learning. So if you have any advice for me, I would love to hear it.
Maybe just a quick follow-up. So does the club have any sort of website or anything? If someone had some nicer, expensive plants like that, they wanted to offer up to the club members first, is there a way to get that word out?
Maybe Facebook. That sounds like what you're like.
I'm not very good with that. On Facebook, you can do that sort of thing.
Yeah. It sounds like you're looking for a message board or some kind of forum where people can trade and offer plants. And it sounds like Facebook would probably be the best place to do that. What we currently have.
Probably some of us have we have some of the more rare plants where they're really hard to grow ones. And we'll go on the Facebook group and be like, hey, I'm selling X, Y, and Z for this much money. I mean, I know Hong, you and I, we grow the really odd ones, the Helicoras. And those ones are really hard to sell. But sometimes we'll post them
You
on
sell
there.
out of those in like 30 minutes.
Yeah, but I'm also the idiot who undersells them because I don't want them. But that's probably the best way to do it is probably on Facebook or just in the group itself. I know there's a lot of them online of Carnivorous Plant USA or something like that. And people will reach them out. Yeah.
Well, there's this guy, Carnivorous plant, which was seedless from the picture somewhere in Eastern San Diego. He might be even a member. He has his website, CPR.
CPR, so quite a few bigger hobbyists like Jeremiah Harris.
Yes, that's
sells
what
on
yeah,
there,
yes,
and
exactly.
I think Jeff sells on there.
Yeah.
Some of the local neighborhood website too that you have grading plan. Another thing I need to add, which is the plan prices, is up to you or your plant, how healthy they are, what kind of species you have. A special species of healthy, of course you can jack up the price. If you look at some plant and it's got a yellow leaf, of course, the people who buy and go, oh, it's kind of rolling a little bit here and there. And that price is so high, no one's gonna touch it.
Exactly. It's a learning experience, right? If you price them too high, you'll learn that it's not selling. So maybe lower the price.
Okay, a slow grower, just like supplements, the cactus slow grower is higher price when you get a bigger piece, bigger plant. So another thing that's what they consider the pricing in that.
Again, this is just my philosophy. I'm sharing what I'm thinking. There's plenty of different ways, like everyone has kind of mentioned and brought up. There's plenty of ways to price things, things to consider when selling plants. I just want to kind of start the conversation, and hopefully this encourages everyone here to start thinking about pricings, thinking about what they can sell at our next summer show and sale in August. So if you want to start planning for that, maybe we have time for one more last question if anyone has anything.
Yes, that's conversation. I think our will be great
raising the issue of, sales on our club site, that's been a controversial topic, and we'll be asking for some input on that one, because we've had some scammers on there.
Yeah, I've seen a couple
Yeah,
people that seem
it's
to
really
be
done by
sketchy.
the police,
Yes.
and there are sites on Facebook dedicated
Yeah.
to sales, and, that's one option, so I think that's a discussion we'll be having. Rob asked about finishing plants or, hardening them off, and, just from my standpoint, I don't have a greenhouse, but I have outdoor grown plants. And in the outdoors, plants get all sorts of diseases and bugs, and things like that. And the last thing I want to do is send anybody home with plants that are grossly diseased or ugly. I know a lot of commercial growers have sort of like a finishing greenhouse or something like that, where they bring everything in. They make sure, pull out the ugly leaves, things like that, but also they might do a vinyl spraying or something like that. So I try, I don't always succeed, but I do try to isolate what I want to sell someplace. And, I try to I do the plants, I do that all the time, but, you can do sort of like a vinyl spraying, and, there are some like totally safe day of event things that you can use, sort of like, there's some based on some chrysanthemums. I'm trying to remember what that chemical is, but it's a houseplant spray that it's totally safe. You can spray it on your food even, but that will knock down any bugs that might be there that day. So, you can do things like that to have a plant that not only will look nice, but also, isn't going to infest somebody's collection or start a collection with bugs that might not be great for them. So. Yeah, so that's what I try to do, yeah. And just, Arya said a few things about pricing and how bad you want to get it. That's always a hard one, because I'm in a position where, I grow a lot of Sarracenia from seed, and I'm looking for, that one plant out of 5% or 2%, that's really unusual or something like that. But along the way, you end up with 80–90% of the plants of the crops that are beautiful plants that most people will be happy with them. But, I want to be conscious that I'm often going to events where people have traveled big distances, commercial growers, and I don't want to undercut anybody terribly. So that's something you have to think about, look at other prices, and you were saying, not trying to make people mad, I undercut them terribly. But that is a dynamic that, how badly do you want to get rid of a plant? That definitely figures the pricing.
Exactly. And I think, again, I want to emphasize, you're not going to get it right the first time. It's a learning process. It's a learning experience. So like I said, there's 4 more regular San Diego meetings before our big show and sale next year. So that's plenty of opportunities to ask around, look at other people's prices. Again, hopefully none of us bite. I'm sure we'll be more than happy to kind of explain like our reasoning for prices or particular species. So yeah, feel free to mingle around. And again, thank you for listening to my presentation. And hopefully you're encouraged to, sell carnivorous plants at any of our next other meetings. Thank you.
By the way, Josh, if you haven't looked at, Red Leaf Exotics is a good one for specimen plants, figuring out the price.
What are you gonna
Yeah, they are.
Oh,
make the announcement?
it's just club business.
Okay.
I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know how we want to.
Yeah.
You're the president. I know.
Hold on, I didn't sign up for it.
Yes, you did.